So I'm going to go ahead and switch over the controls to our new speaker and let him introduce himself to you. And thank you for joining us for the New Life event. I went and read this article that you have. If you go to our speaker page and click on his name, you'll be able to read it. And it was so phenomenal. I am so excited about your presentation. So thank you so much for joining us.
Okay. Thank you so much, Shauna. Do you see my screen?
Yes, we are seeing your presentation file. I think all we need to do now is just click View Slideshow, and we're ready to go.
Okay, I will do that, and I believe you should be seeing that right now.
Oh, absolutely perfect. So I will mute myself and thank you again.
Okay, all right. And as we kick this discussion off, I just want to give you a little context to this particular article. The way I wrote this article is I've been focused on email marketing best practices. I've been involved in email since 1997. And every year, one of the things I do is I get an opportunity to research consumer data, research consumer behavior, and also talk to marketers about key challenges that are facing them. Based on the feedback that I collect, what I try to do is come up with important resolutions for email marketers and for your email marketing programs so you can implement it, all with the goal of creating not just a dialogue, but an interactive dialogue, a back and forth dialogue with the consumers that you serve. So what I have done is put together these 17 best practices, and I'll be walking through those with you as well. A little background on my experiences. I am basically a teacher at heart. I've been teaching since 1990. I've been teaching email marketing since 1997. I work for NCR Corporation, and this gives me access to a lot of consumer touch points and consumer data that I try to apply back into the marketing mix. I started writing an online book 3.5 years ago. The book is called emailyogi.com. And what I try to do with this book is essentially come up with a best practice every single day. And the whole goal behind this is to let a marketer apply something relevant back into their marketing mix. What I have also done, Shauna, is I have taken the presentation and I have made the presentation available via an article which I have hosted on the Email Yogi website. I've also got interesting articles there about what is the first message one needs to put out through a social media program? Because social media, again, just like email, is all about engagement. And as we're going to hear from the other speaker also, coupling your approach of how you communicate with your consumer using different channels is only going to drive a lot of value for your program. So as we start this off.
So as you look at things, essentially, email is important. You hear so much about email being important. And the thing around it is, you've got an email ID. It's not just getting the email ID. It's essentially taking that email ID and keeping it engaged. Getting that email is easy. That's less than half the battle. The key challenge after that is essentially staying in touch with that consumer, getting that consumer to pay attention to what you're saying, and most importantly, if that consumer pays attention to what you're saying, that consumer will share these ideas with others as well. So
I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt. Somehow the sound,
it's quick, it's rather inexpensive to get your message out.
Hello?
A slightly better answer is.
Yes, Sean, I'm sorry.
Oh, the sound just came out the sound got really bad, and it came out, it was very difficult to hear. So I don't know what happened, but it came out, it was, something happened with the sound. So I thought I'd let you know. We were getting some messages.
My apologies for that. The essence of my previous message was that an email ID is extremely important. It's important to engage. And if you look at most people's email marketing programs, what they try to do is they try to leverage email because it's quick and it's easy. A better reason to do email is because it allows you to track how things are working. perhaps the best reason to use email marketing is because it allows you to not only track, but allow you to take things across channel. And really, as you look at all of this, let's start running through the resolutions. So as an email marketer, you have to look at your welcome messaging. And basically, when you write out that first email that welcomes the consumer, think about creating a compelling message to engage the consumer. That first message should be well thought out, well written out, because that is something that the consumer expects. They're looking for it, and that is your opportunity to make that first impression. You should always make sure that this first message is up to date and it's relevant with the correct contact information. And as a part of that first message, what you do need to do is engage the consumer feedback as part of the message. Start by asking the consumer to give you their input, perhaps even updating their preferences, because all of this adds up towards the value of engagement. When you do your welcome streams, don't just think of doing one email, think of doing a series of emails, because that is what will drive engagement. The way it's a good idea to write that first email is think of it as perhaps a birthday card or perhaps a letter that you're going to send a first-time customer. Give them value in it, good informational value that will make them keep that thing forever. And essentially, if you write quality copy and content, it's got something specific and informational, and you can get the consumer to keep it, your engagement level goes up dramatically. Chick-fil-A does an outstanding job in terms of how they make their first line, how they make their consumer pay attention to some of their campaigns. They leverage this information effectively, whether they're even marketing their store, whether they're marketing a particular program, or perhaps they're even welcoming a consumer into the fold with the first email campaign. The second thing one needs to do is essentially think in terms of creating transactional triggers. So if a customer communicates with you, or if a customer has just completed a transaction, think about specific messages for specific transactions. Think of messages for abandoned shopping carts as to what you would like to say to that consumer. Think about what you would say at the end of a purchase. Think about what you would say for a customer service inquiry. Write these out and try to automate some of these so you're not bogged down in terms of waiting to respond to some of the queries that come out. The other thing to do is essentially look at how your transactional triggers are performing on a weekly basis, because transactional messaging is real time, user feedback here is real time, so it gives you an opportunity to go out, see how you're doing, and adjust the performance of your campaigns. A very good and easy way, we had listened to Mike Ober earlier today about how one can essentially go out to the consumer and look for ways to up the shopping basket, perhaps give people a discount, perhaps give them an upgrade on free shipping. But the entire idea behind this is it's based around transactional messaging. And a very good example is that if someone sent out an email, you want to immediately follow up with them and essentially remind them that that initial offer you've made out to them, it's about to expire. So what might happen is, as a consumer, you may have signed up for email from a particular company. That company gave you a discount coupon. Well, don't forget to remind the consumer that that discount coupon or that welcome coupon is about to expire. Perhaps that free shipping coupon is about to expire if they reach a certain threshold, so the consumer can potentially take advantage of it and move things forward. Resolution number 3 is around growing your digital assets, which means we have to think about churn, which is the email IDs that we are losing, and also what are we doing to make up with new email IDs that we can add into the fold. So what you need to do is not just have a program in terms of saying that, okay, I'm going to try and sign up as many people as possible. Try to set a realistic goal and measure yourself in terms of how you are achieving against it on a weekly basis. Because what you can do is not just leverage the email channel, but you can leverage the other channels to grow your email list, and also get other members of your team involved, because as other members of your team do get involved in your program, they're going to start having specific benchmarks for themselves. They're also going to give you feedback on what is working in terms of collecting an email ID, what consumers are saying, and how effective you are in collecting that specific email ID. A question I would like you to ask yourself also is that if someone were to ask you as to what is the value of that specific email address, would you be able to come up with that value? I'll give you an example of what banks do, and we can all apply this back into how we sell over the web. What a financial institution does is that they look at their consumer and they look at the cost of delivering the statement. They also look at the opportunity to advertise to that consumer, and they factor that with the probability of conversion. All of these factors add up to what they believe would be an appropriate value to give the consumer for the consumer to provide them with that email ID. And essentially, this is the same thing we need to do as a seller, which is come up with a value as to what we would assign to that email ID so we can be more effective in collection, because we've got a number to go with it as well. I've got an example of someone who does a good job, and perhaps something we can do from this that's even better. East Bay does a great job soliciting people's contact information. They have a page for social media, they have a page for the paper catalog, they have a page for the web. All of this is great. It would have been even better if all of these channels were tied together into one repository. Again, the goal being that we want to have consistency in how we are capturing, and all our channels are aware now of the information that is being captured, so it can be leveraged into your communication protocol with the consumer. So this leads directly into us having and creating what I'd like to call a preference center, which is that think in terms of coming up with a real-time cross-channel center that can both solicit consumer responses, recognize consumers, and give them an opportunity to fill out information. Typically, when you ask someone for their email ID, take a little extra time and start asking people questions about their preferences. Also, you don't have to put all the questions down in round one, but essentially what you're doing is over time, you're filling out, you're getting the consumer to fill out these forms for you so you can build up a profile for them. You can also use what I'd like to call user interaction or reverse preferences. And a reverse preference is basically not the consumer telling you directly that they'd like to do something, but you tracking their clicks and basically using those clicks to build up a profile about the consumer, because all of that will amount to effective marketing. The key now is not just to have the data, the key is to leverage this data back into your communication campaigns with the consumer. So if I know that the consumer's first purchase with me was on a specific date, perhaps I know that the consumer's birthday was in August, perhaps I know that the consumer has got a 3-month purchase cycle from their previous purchase with me, I can use those dates to set out transactional triggers to that consumer, again with the goal of soliciting engagement to drive better conversions. So number 5, again, preferences are key. Try to put those preferences, and probably, good people, people that we can learn a lot from are people that run loyalty programs. Banks do a good job with that, as well as grocers, because we all tend to have these loyalty cards that can drive our purchase. Let's apply some of those principles back into how we create our own preference centers. Resolution number 5 is we've got to be careful in terms of the volume of emails that we send out to consumers. We don't want to numb the consumer with over-marketing to them as far as campaigns are connected. And there's a couple of ways we are guilty of doing this. At times what happens is we send out so many emails just to try and engage the consumer. Another mistake we tend to do is we tend to use other channels also to communicate with the consumer. So the way we should consider doing things slightly differently is turn the measurement upside down and start looking at a consumer and come up with a limit of the total number of emails that you should send a consumer across different channels, and essentially say that I will not exceed X number of emails for that consumer over the period of a month or a week, because if you do too much, you tend to alienate the consumer may unsubscribe. But the whole idea here is that you put out just enough so the consumer stays engaged with you. A good way to do this is essentially go out, ask the consumer, get them to provide you with preferences, see what they like. And a lesson I've also learned that's effective is that if you've got a transactional trigger scheduled for a consumer, and then you've got a generic welcome campaign or a sales campaign or something that's associated with it, the power of the transactional messaging is immense. And if you can leverage technology to turn that transactional message into a joint upsell message through dynamic content, that would make things even more effective. Surveys are very important and a strategy to continue to build up your preference center. And what you should consider doing is that in every single email that you put out to your consumer, insert a link to solicit that consumer's opinion. What you're doing here is you're simply asking the consumer to tell us what they think about a product or service. And what we need to do is we need to also leverage the other channels, because digital is not the only way to get feedback, but it's a good way to collect all of that feedback. And think of ways to engage the consumer to provide a response. Don't just put out a simple survey. Ask the consumer a leading question, and the consumer is more likely to respond. I learned a lot from a catalog marketer. And what this gentleman used to do was he used to insert $2 bills in a paper survey in the early 80s. And the whole goal behind this was that the consumer would keep remembering that they had to respond to this particular cataloger because they had to fill out that survey. They felt guilty that they had that money. The idea here is to do something to remind the consumer that they need to provide that information, so you can use that to connect with that recipient and take things further with them. It's a very good way to do this. This is a cataloger that puts out a campaign to their consumers. And a couple of things we should remember is, as we build up social content, we need to remember that user-generated social content does a much better job to drive engagement. So our goal is, as we put out these welcome messages and we put out surveys to the consumer, let's take this feedback and let's use this feedback to build up our user-generated content. And so if someone provides additional information about themselves, ask them to take a picture of the product that they've purchased and update their social media sites, your social media sites, so you can make this a lot more interactive. So Shana, I have this up. In fact, I'll tell you the prize I had is I had a couple of bags that I was making available, but I'm not sure how we're going to make this available to people. I can get this shipped, but for those of you who are participating in this, if you go to twitter-winner.com, Shana, you're going to step in and tell me somebody won here.
Yeah, absolutely. I have our three of them, which is, I looked right over here, and we have UDA Mark, Thomas Fireheart, and N. Spirit are the last three I've got here on my screen. So I believe you had three of them, correct?
That is correct.
Perfect, perfect. So UDA, Mark, Thomas, Fireheart, and N Spirit, please go to twitter-winner.com and click on claim your prize so that way we can get your information and send it on over. And congratulations. And by the way, I don't know how many people are following this, but I just found out from our next speaker that he's giving away a netbook. Yeah. All right, so just wanted to throw that in there. And by the way, great education. Everybody on Twitter is absolutely loving all of your education and spreading the word. So I just wanted to say thank you to you for this awesome education.
All right, thank you, everybody. So as we move on a little further, let's think in terms of, we all deal with the consumer, the one that makes the purchase. But let's also think in terms of both the non-buyers as well as the non-responders. And essentially, let's come up with a plan to try and move non-buyers into a buyer category. Go out, survey them, and try to learn something about their behavior that could drive things differently. There's also something in email called your dead file, and your dead file are the people that have not opened your emails. The goal to communicate with the dead file is essentially play with subject lines, play with engagement, try to get much more creative, because what you're trying to do is revive some of those non-responders, and that is where you can get a little creative, trying to solicit some of the other digital media channels. Hopefully these people that you revive, either through providing a coupon or providing something of value to them, is going to teach you something about both improving your email marketing program and also driving engagement through that particular consumer. Something else that you should think about doing also is that go out and take a look at those of your consumers that did not make a purchase. Track their click and use that click to now do a follow-up marketing campaign to that consumer, because you know what they have done, and this is very similar to an abandoned shopping cart. This is very similar to a click that's been made, but basically you're using that click to go back to that consumer and make the next offer or purchase out to that consumer as well. Next thing to consider is essentially, if you have a call center in place as a small business, train your other people channels to know about your program. Essentially, engage these people by pushing offers their way, making the call center aware about the offer, so they are involved more diligently with the consumer when the consumer comes through. I've got an example of Duncraft. They're actually a backyard birding company, and I am a passionate backyard birding enthusiast myself. And what thrills me about my conversations with the call center at this company is that I look at them as not only as backyard birding experts, but I also look at them as someone who is extremely aware of all things social and digital that are being done by this company. And so they are the ones that actually keep me in the loop. And this is something we all want to try and strive towards as well. Testing, we've heard before from Mike Ober as well as from Mihala, is something that is extremely efficient and effective, because what you do want to do is test your best offer out so you can drive results. 3 types of tests that are very useful is, 1, do your A/B tests. Test out different types of subject lines, test out different types of content, but also test out what I call the right path, which means that if you click through to a landing page and everything works properly, well, what do you expect that consumer to do next? Most of us, what we tend to do is we test for mistakes, which is a good thing because we shouldn't have mistakes. But let's also think in terms of, well, what if the consumer was to click through? What would you expect that consumer to do next? I talked earlier about involving your call center. Well, essentially think about involving your call center or other members of your team in terms of seeing the email and getting their feedback in terms of what they would do next. And before you make your campaign available to your entire list, test it out with a small subsection of your audience, because you're going to learn what offer works best, what call to action works best, so you can take the next step in terms of driving efficient conversation. Subject lines are vital in terms of how you put your campaigns out. And I know when I used to do a lot of emails in the beginning, that was one of the last things I would think about, because I had to quickly get the campaign out of the door. Well, now I have trained myself to be a lot more disciplined, and I try to keep my campaign ready 3 days before launch. And what I try to do is I come up with creative subject lines. I go around this in a couple of ways. I engage my team, I solicit their feedback. I in fact even have a little bet amongst members of my team as to which subject line they suggest would do a better job as far as engagement is concerned. It's an informal, fun money pool. We play with it. But the most important learning out of this is that I have my entire team thinking about subject lines prior to the campaign being launched. And this is what can drive very efficient engagement. What I do here is that I'm now thinking about this upfront, and the rest of the subject lines, I'm actually now using it as subject lines for my Facebook, for my Twitter, and even my mobile campaigns. I actually learned a very, I got a little shock once with a mistake I had made with a campaign. I had placed a temporary subject line in a campaign. My temporary subject line said, insert witty subject line here. And I forgot about that. I fired off the campaign. Well, I actually never got many people who were upset with the campaign I got. Instead of that, I had a lot of people give me feedback on what they thought would be a witty subject line. So those subject lines that came back to me actually added to my portfolio of things I could potentially use. And something I do a little different to get into the mood of creating good subject lines is I look at my copy, I look at my creative, I put a word restriction on myself, and I say I need to come up with something catchy, witty, that is actionable within certain number of words. And yes, I also read Chinese fortune cookies, because those tend to get me into the mood to write good subject lines as well. Deliverability is very, very important. Your consumer is expecting the message from you to make it through. But the things you have to do in terms of making sure you're delivered is keep your IP addresses clean, keep your customers and prospects, think about putting them on different IPs, because what might happen is there's a lot of ISPs today that are doing behavioral filtering. And what behavioral filtering really is that if people are not opening emails, the ISP starts assuming that the customer or the reader is not interested in reading your emails. So they start moving them first into the spam folder, and then what starts happening next is that your reputation starts going down and you start getting blocked. So the goal here is to try and keep driving engagement, not only make sure that your bounces are removed, you've got a clean list that's going through and that you're monitoring deliverability, but also make sure that as you put out email marketing campaigns to your consumers, you are making sure that people are opening, reading, paying attention to those campaigns, because that's something that will drive further engagement. So let's look at some of the metrics that we need to look at. When you put out your campaigns, think of looking at your metrics for all your campaigns. Don't just look at your metrics for one particular campaign. Look at a few campaigns, 3 to 6 campaigns, and say that, I need to start panicking about disengaged consumers after a certain number of campaigns. I also like to look at my numbers across channels, measuring the success across different channels. And basically what I do is that I share these reports on engagement engagement with the rest of my team because I want recognition from my management, I want their support from my management, but I also want recognition from my peers in order to take the next steps. Metrics that I look at right away are, I look at my bounces because my bounces tend to give me an idea about my deliverability. My next metric that I personally like to look at are the unsubscribes or the unsubscribe clicks, because I'm now trying to figure out that what did I do in my email to disengage that particular consumer. I next look at my total sales or revenue as a result of that campaign. And then what I try to do is I try to see how I'm moving people between segments. How many people did I move from opens to clicks, from clicks to conversions? And I continue with this cycle as I drive engagement. Social media is key. We're going to hear a presentation on, is there an ROI to be measured in social media? My suggestion is that you do need to integrate social media into your channels. And you want to do this for a few reasons. The first thing you need to do this with is basically make sure that you're using social media to try and build up your list. You're also using social media to solicit input from consumers. So as you solicit input from consumer, you're using real-time user-generated content that can be used to drive even more engagement. I've done an interesting test over the last 3 months. I took a large portion of my list and I split it 2 ways. In one of those lists, what I did was I simply put merchandise and I continued to hit the consumer with offers that were dynamic. However, it was all about products and selling. The second half of my list, what I did is I put out merchandise offers, but I took a small section of that email and I started using user-generated content as a part of it. So I started putting in user feedback, Facebook comments, blog comments, tweets that came back, and I started using that to also put out information to my consumers. Well, after 3 months, what the lesson I learned is that I found a 37% in open rate engagement between the ones that I simply put out merchandise and the ones where I had both merchandise and social content. So social content is important. It's a way to engage, but the key to this engagement is not just doing social media in isolation, but to integrate social media into your channels, especially into email. We've heard this before today, and basically think about doing business as a customer. Pretend you're a customer, go through the process, and basically see what do you like about your campaigns. There was discussion about involving your family in terms of what they think about your campaigns. I think that's a great idea as well. And basically, check and see, does your subscribe process work correctly? Does your unsubscribe process work correctly? And think about the reasons you told your consumer that you're going to put out emails. Do you think you're meeting those commitments? I take this a little further. I'll even call up the call center and I'll try to unsubscribe from an email campaign. And what I try to see is my call center giving me the right reasons as to why I should sign up? Are they defending the email marketing program? And are they doing it appropriately? Because becoming a customer gives you a lot of ways you can learn. But the key again is as you test your process, don't just do it across the one channel, test it across different channels, because both from a legal perspective, from CAN-SPAM, as well as from an engagement perspective, you'll learn a lot. You've got to build up your feedback by responding to queries and comments. You'll get good feedback, you'll get average feedback, and you might get some bad feedback as well. But the thing is to acknowledge it and quickly make available, respond to it quickly. And if it's possible, designate someone on your team, or perhaps distribute that email across to a group of people So the first person who gets it can respond to that comment, but then have a protocol in place that if someone has responded to it, let that person send an email out to the rest of the group that was copied that, look, I took care of this question, I've responded to it. And I do this for two reasons. One, to make the customer happy. Two, I want to make sure that I'm actually leveraging social media sites to drive this kind of conversation and make sure comments, etc., are taken care of expeditiously. Number 16 is I want to solicit input from my peers. I want to let my other channels know how I'm doing. I'm using this to establish metrics. I'm sharing these metrics with other people. And basically what I'm doing is I'm trying to see how can I help the paper catalog? How can I help the self-service channel? How can I do things for people in merchandising? Can I help them out in terms of product placement, reducing the amount of inventory I have? Can I help them with upcoming inventory? Can I solicit input from my customers in terms of what they like, what they do not like, so I can take the next step? So this to me is very, very important because I can drive and take these numbers further. My 17th reason for doing this is I really think that we need to create an inner circle. And what I mean by an inner circle is that the world of the web is very dynamic, it's very effective, but it's very much like this webinar. We're all speaking into, we're listening over, but we are not getting a real chance to see people's expressions and faces and thoughts. So what we need to do is think about creating an inner circle or a first responders club. And what I like to do is for every email campaign that I put out, I put in a link that says, hey, tell me what you think. And I add those people to being part of my inner circle so that when I put my first campaigns out, I include my inner circle of consumers, and they're the ones that are giving me feedback. In the beginning, and I've learned this, and I've got a lot of friends who do email marketing, even if your list size was 50,000, 100,000, 30,000 names, if on every single campaign you have 3 to 50 to 100 people that start responding and giving you feedback, over the course of 50 to 100 campaign, you have a fairly substantial inner circle. And it's good to go to this inner circle not only about your email program, but also in terms of what's going on with your website. Perhaps you're going to update your Yahoo store. You want feedback from consumers directly because they're part of your inner circle and your friends, and they can give you all of this feedback as well.
So as we try.
So what I also did, Shauna, here is I told you that I had 3 bags. I've actually got an extra one. And so if you want to give it out, you pick the winner, you decide, the bag's available to them as well.
Oh, well, wonderful. Well, that would be TJS Variety.
Okay. And I'll tell you something else. On the site, on the website that I have, the Email Yogi blog, I'm actually trying to come up with the value of what people believe is the true value of someone's mobile number. And I want to get people's opinion about mobile. I'm also doing a survey about the value of mobile selling to a real consumer. And as these results become available, Shauna, I'll make them available to you so you can make these results available to your audience as well. But if people click on the stamp, they can take a brief survey and actually give me some input in terms of where that thing is headed as well. So once again, if you could tell us who the person is who's the winner for that.
Oh, that's TJS Variety, and thank you. That's absolutely wonderful information, and we will look forward to sharing that information with everybody. Thank you so much.
Okay, so as we close this discussion out, the entire goal behind your email marketing program is that you want to create a conversation that is profitable, that's measurable. So you need to know the size of your list. You need to know how much you're moving that list. You need to know the value of the email and how much value your email marketing program involves. You want to make this conversation interactive, and if you'd like to read the 17 best practices or the 17 absolutes for email marketing success in 2011, there is an article that Shauna has placed online on the New Life Events website as well. So that, Shauna, is a copy of my presentation. I think for folks' background, the web has made this so convenient. I'm actually 5 hours ahead of you today as I'm making this presentation out to you folks. It's late in the night where I am, but I've actually enjoyed every one of the sessions that I have attended so far. Congratulations to you. This, it really looks like a dynamic weekend and a lot of good information for people as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it's this weekend and everything that we do with the New Life event is just absolutely wonderful. And I kind of said it before, it's probably the second thing that I'm most proud of in my life, the first being my children, but this is something I'm very, very proud of. So thank you very, very much. It's a wonderful event and great to be networking with people, and you're going to have to go online and check out all the talking about you because it's been absolutely wonderful. You're going to have to definitely check that out. So we have a wonderful question here from Wade, which we get this question a lot, and it's such a good question. What determines if an email is classified as being spam?
Okay, so a few different things. At the end of the day, it's the consumer that decides. So if I get an email in my AOL account or in my Yahoo account or my Gmail account, and I click that it is spam, as a consumer, even if I have opted in, that now is marked as something that's unacceptable to me. So what happens next is you, the business that worked with the email service provider to put out that email message, you basically need to get that consumer off the list, but you also need to alert the ISP that, look, I removed the person that said this is spam, but really this person had subscribed on such and such date with this click, but he or she is now no longer on the list. So that's one way it can be classified as spam. The other thing is, usually what happens is emails get delivered to your inbox based on reputation. It's very much like a credit score. So if your IPs are clean and they're putting out these emails, your reputation is high. Every now and then we have bounces, and we tend sometimes to not take those bounces off. Or if a consumer is not aware in terms of why they signed up for an email from you and they say this is spam, all of this hurts you adversely, and that's how things start getting designated as spam as well.
It's tough because you will have people that will sign up and say that they signed up, and then as soon as you send them an email, then they'll say, well, I never asked for that. And sometimes you have to remind them, well, yeah, you signed up here, and so how do you find ways to remind them that yes, that they did sign up and that they are on your list? Have you found that that's the best way to do that?
So, so we can put a simple reminder in the email that basically says that, Shauna, you're receiving this email because you signed up for our program. But from a consumer's perspective, something may have happened. They may not like your communique. They may not have liked an answer, or they're simply tired and they click on spam. So what I do is I try to put in some amount of useful content in the email. And if I might diverge for just a minute and explain to you what I mean by useful content. Shauna, 3 years ago, we purchased a new home. And when we bought this new home, our real estate agent gave us a little postcard that said, here are 21 things you need to do to get ready for winter. And it was simple stuff. Some of it I didn't know, but it was all in one place. It was useful quality information. So I kept it for 3 winters so far because it's helped me keep my house clean and effective. When I put out that email campaign, I'd like you to think about what are the 1, 2, or 3 nuggets of useful information in that campaign that's going to make the consumer think twice about calling it spam. And this is where we need to really think about both engaging socially and also thinking about not just featuring a product, but telling a story, perhaps referring to something useful, inserting a recipe, inserting other things, about a backyard bird, a hobby, again, to make it magazine-like, to make it content-focused, so that makes the consumer's perception that, oh, this is just a product. We reduce some of that because that drives up, if we may call it, acceptability.
It makes perfect sense. Now, we did have a great question from Julie too. So, is it that the ISP from the email service you're using is going to get blocked?
So what happens usually is that the ISP can get blocked, and usually ISPs get blocked if they are using the same IP address to send on behalf of multiple brands, and they're not cleaning up their bounces. Best practices usually means that your business should have a dedicated IP address. Shauna, the cost to do that is marginal. It costs a few $100s, and you've got something that is designated as yours. But usually if the ISP is, the email service provider is blocked, it's usually because they've had a problem somewhere else, and you sort of get stuck with the baggage of trying to fix that problem. Otherwise, if your list is big enough, it's usually bounces and unsubscribes that start causing reputation problems to you. And that is one of the reasons that the first thing I do every morning is I go and I look at my email list and I try and see who all bounce and how quickly can I remove those bounces from my list, because I want to keep my list clean.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, excellent information. Well, you know what? I am now going to have to send you over to Twitter because there's lots of people that are following you now on Twitter and talking with you and just saying thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. And it really was wonderful. Thank you so very much. It was absolutely phenomenal and a lot of great content. Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming on and being a part of the New Life event.
Absolutely, Shauna. And if I could leave you all with one thought. I'd like you tonight, before you all go to bed, think about the one reason why you think someone should sign up for your email marketing program. Write that down and basically use that as a mission statement to create both a dialogue with your consumer, to give your employees reasons to tell the consumer to sign up, because that's sort of your guiding principle mission statement. And this is important because most times when you ask an email marketer as to why should I sign up for your program, the first answer you usually get is, oh, we send stuff, or there's a long pause, and we need to get over that hurdle. Thank you for the opportunity, and good luck to you, and I'll try to attend as many of these sessions tomorrow as well.
Oh, wonderful. We would love to have you. Thank you so much.